we're live.
Okay. Morning and welcome to the Overview Scrutiny Management Committee of the Friday the 11th of June 2021. As normal, if I can ask for those who are not speaking, for your cameras to be off and your microphones to be muted. I won't go through the full housekeeping list. I'm sure that over the last few months you've heard this a number of times. So again, today we've got a one item agenda, which is the report for the new normal. But first, for any apologies for today's meeting.
Councillors Chris Evans and Matthew Evans, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And any declarations of interest from anyone? Okay, so firstly, if we go on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 30th of April. So if we start, which is agenda pack, page 3, draft minutes, for accuracy to start with. So page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. And any matters arising from the previous minutes? No. Okay, if we can pass those as a true record. Thank you. And so we're going on to the agenda item number 4, which is the new normal. I'd like to invite Rhys to present. Thank you for attending today, Rhys.
Board, everybody. Thanks for having me again. Okay, so I thought I'd do a bit of an overview first of all, and then quite happy to take questions on the report that's in front of you. And obviously last time we came with this report, we had a very useful conversation around the approach and things that were important, etc. So more than happy to undertake that again. I have to give an apology, Chair, to the committee, because the report that was sent through, I noticed yesterday when going back through it, it was missing a graph, which I believe Neil has now sent out to committee members. So I'll try and talk through that as well while we're going through this. Before I start, in the previous discussion, there was a question around active travel. And we have tried to cover that off within the cover of the report. So if I just get back to it, the committee discussed active travel and queried if we can measure and survey the number of active travel miles that staff undertake, and also look into the possibility of rewarding staff for taking part. A comment was also made if we could look into any kind of barriers that it may cause. So we can do some additional work on that. At the moment, we're part of the Gwent Healthy Travel work as part of that charter. And we, in February 2020, surveyed, so pre-pandemic, because obviously things have changed now, but pre the pandemic, surveyed staff, had a response from 720 members, which talked about the range of ways in which they travelled actively. There wasn't any data in that, unfortunately, around the sort of mileage they might do via walking or cycling, etc. So that's something for us to work on. But the committee asked about barriers. Now, we've listed the barriers that came out of that survey in our cover report. They are not specific to Newport. They are what our staff said, but they're very much in line with responses elsewhere as well. So for those of us who cycle, you will find no surprises in the list of barriers to cycling that are covered there. Walking, insufficient pedestrian crossings, and then both. And in this, it's some of the issues have been pulled out around this sort of integrated transport infrastructure that currently isn't in place. So for any of us who've attempted to make any journey involving getting a bicycle on any other mode of transport, you'll recognise, I think you'll recognise some of those barriers there. So again, happy to have a conversation about that as we move through. So within the report, obviously you've had an initial look at the current position and what position was before the pandemic and what we've done since. So I'm not intending to cover off those sorts of areas again, but just go through the bones of this report then. This essentially, pending your comments, will be the report that then goes to Cabinet on the 7th of July. So as you requested, you wanted to see it here and have a further conversation about it before that happened. The process from here on in will be the report will go to Cabinet with a series of recommendations as they potentially affect our staff. What we'll be asking for is some agreement from Cabinet to consult with staff on a range of things. So we'll talk through that now, and I believe Rachel Davis, who's our HR manager, is on the call. So if you've got any specific questions around the staffing side of this, Rachel will be able to talk with some authority around those things. I have covered off within this report some additional things that give it a bit more of kind of that background and a more holistic view of what we're trying to achieve. So the first one of those within your report, which is on page 16, I believe, of the report, which is Welsh Government's Remote Work in Wales initiative. So for those of you who are not aware of that, Welsh Government are setting up a series of public sector remote working hubs across Wales. Now, they are within public sector bodies, and there's an opportunity for public sector workers to register to work from those. So we're working quite closely with Welsh Government on that initiative. And the Welsh Government's aim is that 30% of the Welsh workforce to work remotely from home or near home. So this is all part of that agenda. So there's two aspects of that impact on us, particularly for Newport. One is we hold obviously data on where our staff live. So we're able to work through that and allocate and determine those remote working hubs which are closest to their homes, which are within walking distance or a short commute by public transport or active travel to. And there's an offer then for those staff to be able to work from those. So obviously that takes away any impact on home energy costs. It takes away the impact of feeling isolated if you're working from home or having a home environment which is not conducive to you being able to work from home. So it obviously does that. And the other bit of it is as well, these remote working hubs are located in town centres. So the idea then is to get more people within those town centres. So the other side of this is looking with Welsh Government about whether we can create a public sector remote working hub in Newport, utilising probably part of our civic centre. So we can cover that off when we're talking around the building side of it as well. So we included that. There's a section on in climate change. I would, moving back into the report, just refer back. I'm not intending to cover off in any depth here, but obviously that there's a small bit in the report, but it is also linked into the carbon management plan, sustainable travel strategy, and Gwent Healthy Travel Charter, which are also all bits that support that climate change carbon reduction initiative. So the big issues for us in Newport, obviously, as a city that is on the M4, and again, you know, all these arguments are well rehearsed. You know, air quality. An improvement of air quality is a really important thing, so that's a consideration for us. And again, the lower number of staff we have travelling into the area and necessarily using their own vehicles, the better. Plus, we've got some very challenging carbon reduction targets in place, and you know, and again, that all adds to it. And as that section says, 45% of all carbon emissions in Newport originate from transport. All right, so we are part of that. We are not, obviously, our staff and members in Newport are not the sole contributors to that 45% of carbon emissions. As far as the approach is concerned, we split it into four sections. Staff, the building, and by the building, we are talking about the Civic Centre at the moment as far as this report concerned. So the building and public access to that building. The democratic functions, which obviously impact on you. And then the fourth bit is about technology. And just to say about that, I'm happy to have a conversation about it. But we won't be asking Cabinet for any decisions around the technology side of it. I think I've previously said the committee have been in a fortunate position where there have been investments in IT over the last 3 years. Our IT provision has improved significantly as a result of that. We're in a shared partnership with Shared Resource Service with 3 other local authorities and Gwent Police in order to deliver those efficiencies and get more for our money as far as that's concerned. And we have a clear plan about what we're going to do around technology and how we're going to be more enabled over the coming years in order to be more flexible and agile in the work that we do. And just to say, and committee will be involved in this as we go through. You know, we will be are in the process of rewriting the digital strategy for Newport, which includes both the organisation, internal aspects, but also how we support the city and our public and our residents to become more digitally enabled. So we're working through that process as well. So we won't be asking Cabinet for any decisions on that. There's a section in the report on it, but no real decisions. So for each of those, we've got an objective that we've set, and then obviously some work around what that looks and feels like. So the staff objective is to consider all the implications of the implementation of a smart working approach for our staff, and that includes looking at well-being, remuneration, and personal development and professional development and support side of it. So there's some data in there about pre-pandemic and what it was like. I said talked previously in the report about the wellbeing surveys that we've undertaken. So Rachel has put data into the report around what's come back through those wellbeing surveys. Just to say, second paragraph in there, the council also carried out surveys on manager wellbeing and the impact that working from home has had. And the graph that Neil would send out to you yesterday then follows directly from that bit. So apologies for that. And that will then obviously go out into the public papers and the minutes. But just for the committee, just so that it's part of the record. So in that, 1 was being a negative response and 10 being the most positive. Most of the responses you'll see in the graph were on the positive side of that, which suggests that working from home was seen as something that was a positive for those individuals. But I think, and again, Rachel might want to add to this, or you may have questions about it, but I think the overall position for us is that what is being highlighted is that we need to relook at the way that we support well-being with our staff group in a remote working world. So and again, when I come on to the essentially the proposals and recommendations that will go to Cabinet, pending your comments, that is picked up in there. Remuneration, there's a section on that as well. So these are, you know, UK government schemes. So there's a specific scheme in place at the moment because of the pandemic, and staff being requested to work from home, which is a tax-free allowance. There's the scheme that will apply after March the 31st next year, is the usual scheme that was in place, which means an employee can pay up to £26 a month, which is non-taxable as a home working allowance for a member of staff. So that is the kind of the framework in which we're looking at that remuneration package for staff. Obviously complications, and when we come on to some of the other questions around this, we talked in the last meeting, and it's clearly not clearly one of the things we picked up now. We are not advocating that any of our staff solely work from home. That is not what we're going to be doing. We are working with service areas around the proportion of time staff need to be within an office environment, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. And the well-being aspects and personal professional development are two of the really key things. And I think we had a conversation last time about leadership, support, etc. That we all feel it's really important that staff do feel as part of a team and an organisation, and you do that by them being together with their teams for periods of time during the week. So we are looking at it that way. So that's a maximum figure, not necessarily the figure that we would be reimbursing staff. Rachel's pulled out in this as well, so the policy review. So these are the sort of things we'll need a decision to consult with, decision from Cabinet so that we can consult on. So home working policy, we'd have to consult on that. Travel and subsistence policy, there are implications to that which we would need to consult on as well. So there are some policy changes that we would need to undertake if we go down this road. So that, Rachel, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about the staffing side of it before we go into the challenges.
Sorry, I was on mute. There's quite a lot of detail that we're working through in terms of how do we do efficient training and development that's going to support people to work remotely, focusing on their well-being. So we've already identified an additional learning and development package that will enable people to do remote learning that's around their well-being, so that we don't have to have face-to-face training. And so we're looking to pull together a whole package of support that staff, whether they're a manager or an employee, will be able to access in order to be able to work remotely on a long-term basis. So yeah, we're working through the detail around what that package could look like.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. You go to some of the challenges with this model. Health and safety is the first one on this. So just to say to committee, we are trying to take a really pragmatic approach to this. So we feel that we have the capability, clearly have the capability, because we've been doing it for the last 15 months. We have the capability for most of our organisation to work remotely. We have an expectation from our staff that is something they're going to be able to do in the future. So we've got those things. There are clear benefits around, carbon reduction, air quality, etc. Just, well-being generally. However, there are detrimental impacts to that as well. So we will need to relook at the well-being package we put in place, and actually being pragmatic about it would also enable us to actually look at individual needs, because there is no one size fits all for people here. So within the report, what we picked up is things like health and safety assessments. So some staff, we will inevitably determine that it is within their personal interest for them to attend a workplace each day that they're employed. So I just want to say to you that is something that we need to pick up in this, and that's the approach we've taken. I certainly don't want to see staff put in detrimental positions, but similarly, we will have staff who we're able to keep working longer than they would have been previously if we're able to enable them to work from other locations. So there's a flip side to that as well. The culture picked up, and I think I've covered that slightly as well in our approach, which is going to be a more hybrid version to this, should Cabinet agree to it, which is, we need to maintain an organisational culture. And that's difficult to do if you never see each other. So Teams has been incredibly good for us over this period of time. However, if we have opportunities in the future to be able to bring groups and staff together in their teams in order to learn and develop and and progress together, then obviously we need to put in place mechanisms to do that. So as far as staff is concerned, there's there are a series of options within the report. Just to say, and sorry, I meant to say this right at the offset. Obviously, there's the first question for Cabinet is, because these are clear options and people have different views about this. Once COVID restrictions are lifted and it is deemed safe to operate as we were before, we could go back to the previous operating model. There is nothing, fundamentally stopping us, but obviously we will not take advantage of any of the other things if we do that. So that is the start of a 10. So a decision needs to be taken on that. So the considerations and options, if we assume that isn't what we're going to do, so let's just work on that basis at the moment. What we'll be asking Cabinet for, so it's going to be worded slightly differently in the Cabinet report because it's going to be asked for a decision. Here they are posed more as questions or points for you. We need to consider the introduction of a home working policy and associated allowance for staff required to work from home at least 1 day per week. Right, so that is one of the things we're going to have to do. So if Cabinet is, wants to progress with this, we will need to develop that and consult on it. We need to review the flexible working scheme and appropriateness going forward. Again, that is something we will need to develop and consult on. We need to invest in new approaches to staff support and long-term health conditions with the emphasis on supporting mental health in a post-pandemic environment. And again, so Rachel's working on that at the moment. And we'll need to employ different techniques and tactics to ensure engagement with a dispersed workforce. So these are just pieces of work then that we need to undertake from a HR perspective and then across the organisation within that cultural environment. So that's the staff inside of it. It's very complicated, and I talked a lot about this when we previously discussed this. So just to reiterate this now, at the moment, our primary goal is to ensure the safety of our staff, our members, and the public. So, we're operating under specific restrictions as it currently stands. Post that, our priorities will still remain being looking after the health and safety of our staff, our members, and the public. So that is going to be the #1 priority for us. There are a series of opportunities and gains associated with having a remote workforce, but there is no point in us achieving those if it has a detrimental effect on the mental health, well-being, or physical well-being of our staff. So we need to make sure that we cover that off in those policies, but also the additional work that Rachel's team are doing around well-being and learning and development, etc. Next section, building, again, and public access, and again, specifically looking at the civic centre. So there are a series of objectives in there, which
really
are...
Sorry, can I interrupt you a second?
Yeah.
Would it be possible that we fire into questions about staff and then go into buildings? Is that okay?
Fine.
Is that all right?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair.
No,
I meant to say,
fine.
how did you want to do it? No, that's absolutely
That's fine. If that's okay, because obviously then we can take it each section at a time if that's okay with you. Because I know Councillor Forsy's got a hand up, but if I can just ask a couple of things. I know obviously the complication with home working is the tax implication, isn't it? And the 2-3 split of if you're in the office for 2 days a week, more than 2 days a week, then you're not a home worker. If you're home for 3 days a week, then you become this home worker, but then you also can't be in the office on the same day every day of the week, because then I understand, so that there is that added complication, isn't there? So is it they're more agile working contracts than home working contracts in terms of tax purposes? So as I said, for tax, I'm a home worker. I can't go into the office for more than 2 days a week. Obviously, this is split over the financial year, so I could go in for 2 weeks, but then I couldn't go in for a certain amount of time. And I've also been told that I can't go into the office every Monday and Tuesday, because then it becomes a regular place of work. So if I was to go in for the 2 days a week, it would need to be Monday, Tuesday 1 week, Wednesday, Thursday a different week, and that was down to tax implications from my side of things. So that it's different. So, and that's a home worker contract, and then that's that £26 remuneration for me. So it's difficult. Are we not? Well, we're not looking at any home working contracts per se. We're looking at more agile working contracts. Is that right? Whereas home working becomes the more permanent basis.
I think I'll probably hand over to Rachel on that, because it was a series of complicated tax
questions. It was. Sorry, I just know from. I said it's a bit of a funny one. It's a bit of a funny one.
Yeah.
And again, there are options around what we choose to do. So yes, you are right. If we are going to designate an employee's home as a place of work, we will need to set that out contractually, and we will need to say, you know, your contract's going to vary. The civic centre, for example, or any other council building is no longer your full-time place of work. You will have 2 or more places of work where we expect you to go. I think less on the contract side, but more on the logistics side of how many desk spaces we've got available and how many meeting rooms are available on given days of the week will probably determine how that flexibility can and can't work anyway. So if a person wanted to come in on a day that's designated as a home working day, there actually might not be the facility to accommodate them anyway, because we've got different people in on that day. So the options are around whether we set specific days that people have access to the building, or that they are working from home. And any contractual variation will then fall upon us as an employer to consider that remuneration, whether that's a prorated amount. As we said earlier, I don't think the expectation is anybody would be working from home on a full-time basis. We might have some temporary arrangements based on individual need, perhaps around a long-term health condition, accessibility, etc., that we would want to consider on those individual merits. As a general principle, we're not expecting to change contracts to say you are a home worker on a permanent basis, but we will need to separate out, as you say, in order for the tax purposes to be able to make that payment. We will have to know, are you a home worker, are you an office-based worker, and what does that split look like? Yes, bearing in mind, of course, we need flexibility for if something changes, and we do need a whole team to come in for a fixed task. It might be only for a couple of hours on a home working day. I believe that that temporary workplace is acceptable for them to go and do that task and come away, as opposed to the full day working in the office.
Okay, thank you. Because I was again with the home working, then you have to do these health and safety assessments of the work of the home workplace, don't you? And potentially we're liable to provide desks, any equipment that's needed at home, I suppose, when you go down that route. So a question and this is going to bridge over buildings and staff, I guess, then, which you alluded to with the booking. Are we going to be looking at maybe setting up a booking system for the civic centre, also for the offices? So whereas I guess we've got, at the moment, we've got staff in rooms and they've got their own, you know, they've got their own areas. Is it a potential that we can now have a booking system for hot desking within there? So potentially teams can come in on one day if they block book those desks, I guess.
Yeah, it so look, I'll try not to repeat this when we start talking about the building side of it, but we're looking at the optimization of the space that we require within the civic centre. So you know, it's in the report, and we talked about it last time. It's a huge building, and we're pre-pandemic, we're using a fairly small proportion of it. So we're intending using a small one. So I'll cover off the detail of that. We are looking at a booking, yeah, absolutely looking at a booking system, some sort of booking system. Now there is one that we can utilise, which I believe SRS have developed for one of the other partners. So we're looking to borrow off that. But the key thing for us, and it goes back to what is the purpose of having the building, or any building, and for us as an organisation, it's partly to do with the work that people do, but also a big proportion about it is a publicly accessible building, and we do work with, you know, members of the public, residents, service users, etc., partners within the building. So the model we're looking at the moment gives us, as Rachel said, around about 250 workstations, but significantly more collaborative and meeting space than we currently got. So no impact on council chambers or committee rooms, they all still exist, but other space developed as well. So a booking system in order to manage that. But in order to facilitate that and ensure that we've got appropriate resources for services to undertake the activities they need, we will look at a zoned approach to doing that. So prior to the pandemic, you know, we'd done some visits to other local authority areas and other organisations about how they'd managed this sort of smart working environments. So basically compress it down to a significantly smaller number of desk space than they previously had. And then essentially people just get that hot desk environment. So we're kind of looking at that, but actually we don't think that is appropriate for us and the work that we do. So for instance, if you're in social services, primarily the reason you're going to be in the building is because you need to be with your colleagues in social services for supervision, for work that you're doing as a team around cases or activity, or to work with families, individuals, service users. So there's no point us having those scattered to the four winds within the civic centre. They need to all be in the same place. So we'll take that. So basically, yes, there will be a booking system. There will be desk space, but we're keeping that to a minimum. There will be collaborative and meeting space, and it will be zoned. That's the plan. If we go down this route, that will be the way we'll implement it.
Okay, thanks, Reece. Just one more comment, because it's really important, I think, and you've mentioned it and you've brought it up quite a lot. Is that disconnect and having some sort of training of staff on how to do that disconnect from working from home, because you know, I guess you're the same. You've been on when you're on holiday. I'm the same. Being able to have that disconnect of your working hours when you work from home is a really difficult thing to do. And I feel that a lot the more less senior staff are probably worse, because they feel that they need to. It's almost like you've got to prove that you're working for those consistent hours. Whereas actually, if you were in the office, you would walk away from your desk, have a chat with somebody, probably take an hour for lunch if you were going to go somewhere. Whereas if you're working from home, there's a potential that you're sat in front of your desk without getting up for 6-7 hours. It's really important. I feel that it's communicated to staff that disconnect, and how they is there training that we can do with the well-being of learning to use that disconnect and not feeling that they're under pressure, that they should be sat in front of their monitor for 7. And I know as senior staff we don't feel that way, and that's certainly something that we won't be asking, but how we need to make sure that that's communicated, I think, from a line manager to the staff. We're not, you have to take your lunch, you have to walk away from your desk, even if it's to go outside for half an hour of a walk lunchtime. You have to have that disconnect, because otherwise, that mental well-being is going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, Chair, 100% agree with you. I think we discussed this last time. And we have significantly bigger issue with people overworking at the moment than underworking. I think our staff have been incredible all the way through the pandemic. It's been exceptional circumstances, but the disconnect is really challenging, and there are a number of aspects of that. One is about training and information for staff about how they manage that. But the other one is a cultural one, and organisationally just getting our heads around how we're going to approach this, because it's different if you're on a and I get that we're in exceptional circumstances at the moment, but people know that you're contactable because they know that you're the other end of a computer. So it's very difficult to get downtime in those circumstances. And prior to the meeting starting, just another thing on that, prior to the meeting starting, there was a conversation about access to Newport City Council systems via your personal devices, smartphones, etc. We are piloting a way of doing that, a secure way of doing it. The reason it's been stopped previously because it wasn't we didn't feel as secure as it needed to be. So a secure way of doing that. So for instance, I have that on my smartphone. I don't have a works phone. I just have my personal phone. That's my choice. And I have access to the Office suite on that. So emails, Teams meetings, etc. as well. but that's my personal choice. That then, if we roll that out across the organisation, that then gives us an additional dimension because you're even more contactable and accessible. And you're absolutely right, Chair. There is a differential there. You know, as a chief officer, I expect that to happen, and I get compensated for doing it for that. You know, that just comes with the territory and with the job. However, for most of our staff, they're employed to undertake a function, and actually, you know, we need to be much better. They need to be much better, and an organisation we need to be much better in ensuring that they can switch on and off during the course of a day. And home working and remote working brings its own challenges to that, because you're absolutely right. If you're working in an office, you usually have some sort of commute. You know, you have a period of time to think about getting into work. You work, and then you have a period of time in which to switch off from work. Somebody muted me then as I was finishing that sentence off, but that's fine.
Somebody muted me as well. I don't know what's going on here. Councillor Fawsey had a question. Sorry for taking up so much of your time there, Reece. Councillor Fawsey.
Thank you. I didn't mute anybody. I think to go back to the beginning, what we were saying earlier was that this is still a developing picture, and you know, we still need to be keeping things under review, really. However, I think all our ideas about remote working have just changed so much from 18 months ago. The thought of everybody going back into the office just seems crazy and old-fashioned now, doesn't it? Employees to some extent should have choice over it, because what suits some employees doesn't suit others, and obviously we're looking at a variety of hybrid working, but I think choice is important. From what Reece was saying just now, are we going to be looking at renting out some sections of the building? The building's going to be empty at times. Can we get other partners that we work with to come and work in there? The main topic that I wanted to talk about was active travel, and some of the points listed in the first part of the report are barriers to active travel, but not all of those barriers are equal. They're just given as a list, but some are more important than others. Possibly one of the things we could do is ask staff what the top 2 barriers are. And I've got 3 comments I think I want to make about active travel. One is one of the things that I always say: we need to provide secure bike parking for employees. The other one is that we need to reward active travel in some way, which could possibly be 20p per mile for riding your bike, you know, for work purposes, some sort of incentive. You could even have like a competition between departments about how many active travel miles they have. And the other comment that I wanted to make was about active travel mentors. There are quite a lot of people who like to cycle, but don't really have the confidence. And part of that is they don't really know the routes. Well, if you have somebody who's used to cycling, and they could possibly cycle with somebody who's aspiring to, show them the routes, show them how to cope with junctions or how to avoid junctions, and if somebody went with you a few times, after that you possibly could sort of gain the confidence to do it on your own, because we do have an increasing cycling network, and there are routes that people don't know about. So it's something that is developing, and we could help people to take advantage of what we have got. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Lucy, do you want to make comment on that? Or
Yeah, no, that's fine. Some useful things in there. So yeah, really like the idea of active travel mentors. I think that's a really good idea, and we can look to work with colleagues on doing that. I think the active travel, rewarding active travel, obviously there's a bit in this about a recommendation reviewing the travel and subsistence policy. So I think there's some scope within that to look at that. Secure bike parking. We have got some, and I think that probably be my response to quite a lot of those barriers that were identified by staff. We have got some secure bike parking currently within the building, but it's not enough. And certainly the last time I think I put my bike in there, it was filled with other things. So it's just been seen as a bit of storage. So, you know, that's a cultural issue then around making sure that when we identify something, we do it. Councillor Forsey, I saw your comment. I will email you to tell you where it is and how you access it. But it's a packable system, so you have to pack into the room and out of the room in order to store there, but it's off the pavement. So we have got that, but again, not enough. And I would say that about some of those other barriers. Shower facilities, we have shower facilities in the Civic Centre. We do need to develop that more as part of whatever we do, because if we're encouraging people to when they do have to come into the building not to bring their cars, then that's something we need to cover off. Can certainly have a look at what we've got as far as the weighting of some of those barriers, because obviously you've just got a list there, and I'll ask the team to have a look at the actual data that sits behind that. Rental of space is really interesting one. That does very much flow into the building part of this, which is, you know, we have a beautiful, large, historically important building, and I would like to see nothing more than for it to be brought back into full usage, with a range of organisations and services that need the space. We don't need the space, but there will be space that we can utilise in different ways. So we've obviously been having conversations with Welsh Government around provision of a public sector remote working hub. We won't generate any revenue from that, because that is a sort of mutual agreement, because our staff will be able to use other venues for free as well. But there are some other opportunities in there for us to work with other parties around generating either income or around it, or development of the building in different ways. So that's absolutely key. It's pointless us compressing ourselves into a smaller bit of the building and then not using the building for anything else. So, you know, that's part of the conversations we've been having. I recognise your comments about choice, but that's a really challenging one. So I think we obviously need to take into consideration individuals' circumstances when determining how and where they work. But we've also need to balance that against the organisational needs. So, you know, it isn't quite as simple as saying to somebody, you've got a choice about whether you can work from home or not. Very much depends on their role, the activity they do, but we do need to take into consideration their views in that as well. So that is a bit complicated, but I recognise the point.
thank you. Thanks, Reece. Councillor Hoolrahan, you've got a question?
Thank you, Chair. It was a comment more than a question. In the barriers to active travel, on page 11, one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is aggressive motorists and road rage being one of the big disadvantages of active travel. It comes from my time when I was a manager in central Cardiff for an organisation that intended to promote cycling, because the government gave fairly generous tax allowances for buying bikes, and that was one of the greatest complaints that came to my door, was the fact that motorists just don't give enough room for cyclists. And of course, when you're converging on somewhere like the Civic Centre, the people who are cycling to the Civic Centre are in competition with the people who are driving to the Civic Centre, and it's a big education initiative that's required to get one to tolerate the other. So if we could maybe see that one put in as a bar to active travel, please. And then I'll reserve my comments on the buildings until later, Chair, as you've suggested. Thank you.
Shall I respond?
Yes, please, Rhys.
Yeah, so look, I think, you know, I think generally in the, there's a comment, isn't there, around you know, road safety, you know, and as a cyclist, I would say I fully recognise the risks that you know, cyclists can, you know, as a cyclist you are a very vulnerable road user, and I would, you know, but I'd also say, and I cycle quite a bit, you know, I'd also say that generally most drivers are reasonably good, but obviously it is a risk, and you know, I don't think I ever go out you know, I don't think I ever go out cycling and not end up going home without thinking that was quite a near miss. We have very busy roads regardless of where you are, and cycling infrastructure needs to be better. But as you will be aware from the press, that is, you know, there's not a consensus on how you do that in the UK. You know, lots, and certainly within the press, lots of the press feel that cyclists are a nuisance, which I struggle with as a comment. So. So, like, you know, I totally get that. We can have a look to see if we can break down. I think that's probably been brought up into the road safety. I suspect there were quite a lot of comments in there about how vulnerable and unsafe cyclists feel, you know, on busy roads, particularly in the city centre, and how you cope with that. And particularly often because, you know, Newport is pretty hilly as well, and as a cyclist, traveling slowly up a hill on a busy road is not a great experience. So yeah, I absolutely get that, but we can have a look and see if there were any further details within those comments.
Yeah, I also note, Chair, that there are proposals to amend the highway code in respect of cycling, and I look forward to that with interest. But it's always worth remembering that a slight mistake from a cyclist can often be fatal. A slight mistake from a motorist rarely inconveniences them too much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Al-Nawami, got a question?
Yeah, it is a question. First of all, can I just say, apologise. I really had difficulty this morning joining this meeting, and I found out that my laptop lost its audio altogether, but I managed to restore that. I still can't see anyone, but I hope you can hear me. The question is that the document, again, is a very interesting document. It highlights a number of points, challenges, all of which I think are, you know, valid, and we have got to look at that. We have to look at them. But what I felt was missing, or at least was not really explored in much detail, was the interface between the public and the council. At the end of the day, you know, whatever technology can offer, I think people look at the council as, you know, it's a natural resort for them when things don't go well. you know, whether they're applying for a resident parking permit or whether an HMO in the midst is really causing a lot of problems with the occupants and with the waste and with all that. And, you know, at the end of the day, they like to go and be able to see something. See someone. I've had an experience actually accompanying a family last year before the COVID, when they went to the information station, and they were able to see someone who can actually deal with their issue, you know, face to face. And when we finished with that, they were really full of praise for that facility by the council. And I think there are many other occasions when people like to see face to face, you know, appreciate that meeting. So whatever sort of mode for working and reorganization we might think of, you know, and decide on, I think we've got to sort of, you know, pay that aspect of the interaction between council or council officers, council operatives, if you like, with the public. You know, then, you know, you can do things by email, you can do things by sort of Teams and so on, but people like to see someone. So I'd like to see really, you know, perhaps if we go for this hybrid model, that really we would have a facility like the information station, or maybe an extended version of it, because people have issues with social services, they have issues with you know, various application, council tax, resident parking, all that. People have actually told me it's not good really that I have to rely on the call center. We need to have, I need to go and see someone. Same thing with the planning, of course, when they want to query what's planning application is likely to affect them and all that sort of thing. So I'd like to say that we really need to pay that an important attention, because that is at the heart of engagement and local democracy.
Thank you. Risa, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Al-Nawami. That's a really interesting point. I'll say some things now, and then I will make sure that bit of the report is beefed up before it goes to Cabinet, just to reiterate this. So this specifically, you know, looking at those staff who can work remotely and the use of the civic centre. So if I'll concentrate on that, because I think some of that comment stroke question bleeds out of that. So at the heart of this, you know, we've talked about the fact that the civic centre is and should remain a publicly accessible building. And actually what we want to do is enhance that. Now I'll put the caveats in this, right? You know, there has been a direction of travel within the local authority, as it has been in every other local authority and every other public sector body, and essentially pretty much every private organisation as well, around what I think is an awful term, but, you know, around this channel shift agenda, which is, you know, offering more services online or via the phone rather than face to face. And there's some valid reasons for doing that, and obviously there's a cost implication. So as we're trying to be more efficient and utilize our resources better, there's some big financial reasons why you would want to do that. But also for lots of our residents, it is often just the easiest way to get stuff done. So rather than, you know, waiting to speak to somebody or having a meeting with somebody, if you can do something through an online provision, then that's, you know, then and you can do that quickly and easily and it's effective and efficient, then why wouldn't you do that? But none of that takes away from the fact there are people within our communities, and there are circumstances in which a face-to-face discussion is the appropriate avenue. So the more of the other stuff we can deal with via our website and the CRM system, the more we can actually focus on the other side of it. So so there needs to be provision for that. Now, you know, there is provision for that. Currently not open provision for that from the information station, but also in the Civic Centre. So what we've looked at with this work in the Civic Centre is ensuring that those services that need to be able to provide that front-facing public service are able to do it and have enhanced facilities for doing that. So social services is a really, you know, good point in that. They do, you know, technology cannot really take the place of what social services do. So social services need facilities in which they can work with the people they're working with in order to support them. But other bits of the organisation do as well. So we're looking at through customer services and then that interface back to other bits of the organisation. And actually the term of hybrid approach to that works really well, because, you know, if a member of the public turns up here, not today, because obviously we're not open for business, but, you know, if a member of the public turned up to the Civic Centre pre-COVID and had a query, that member of staff may have been in the building. But now we've put in place technology within our meeting rooms, so actually you could put in a call, that person could be working remotely and you could put a call through to that person. So the member of the public could speak to that member of staff via Teams in one of our meeting rooms. So you could have that kind of hybrid model in place as well. I'll put more into the report before it goes to Cabinet to ensure that that's borne out. And if Scrutiny want to make specific comments about it, that can also be included in the report. But just as that's been at the heart of what we've been talking about with the building is what are we using it for? You know, if we just needed some office space somewhere, there are cheaper alternatives. But actually, it is the Civic Centre. It's a public building. It is the building for the people of Newport. That we do deliver services to and from there for people, so there needs to be facility for that. So what we tried to do is enhance that with it. But I take it, Councillor, that hasn't come through as clearly as it should have in that section in that report.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Thanks. I mean, the last thing we would want, you know, is to be called the sort of faceless bureaucrats, isn't it? Which would literally be the case, I suppose, if we're totally dependent on technology to connect us with the people who, if you like, you know, elect us, pay our wages and expect services to be delivered by.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with that, and I'll put my head of IT hat on now when I say this. So we're working on the new iteration of the digital strategy. We're working with WLGA around that and others. You know, the strapline is that is going to be the individual at the centre of that strategy. So digital capabilities and technology should enhance the work you're doing with people, not replace it. So
okay.
Wherever possible, you know, as I said, for you know, and individuals' expectations have changed during COVID as well, because so many things have gone online. So the world has changed. It doesn't look the same as it did pre-COVID, and it won't after COVID. But we will always have those activities and those functions that can only be or are significantly better delivered face to face with somebody. So more of the other stuff we can take online, the better. That leaves us more resource to do a better job of the other things. And the digital capabilities and technology should enhance that, not replace it.
Okay, good.
Thank you. I really like that, actually, what you said there, Reece, of being able to have a meeting room and connect via Teams. I think that's a really clever and really forward-thinking idea. So as you said, you can, even if the person isn't in, you can still have a video call or something else. It's not. It's a really clever use of the technology, as you said, and as Councillor Allen said, we don't become faceless. There is still somebody at the end of the line, and it's quite nice, you know, a video to see somebody that person at home might not have that opportunity to have that sort of call. So that's a really good thing to do. Councillor Ferris, you had a question.
Yeah, a couple of questions and a comment effectively. The comment first. I wish I'd cut this out. Oh dear, We've got Big Ben going off in the background. Sorry about that. Yeah, I wish I'd cut it out. It appeared in the eye. It was only a very small article, like a couple of paragraphs, and that was within the last month, saying that legally council meetings, it didn't stipulate which council meetings, but council meetings would have to be more or less old school face-to-face to be legally binding. Can you add any light to that, Rhys?
It applies solely in England, councillor. So the legislation that was passed in England was slightly different to Wales. It had an end date for that facility. In Wales, it's been essentially overtaken by the Local Government and Elections Act. I think Gareth is on the call. He might, if he's got anything he could add to that, but that doesn't apply to Wales essentially.
Right. The other questions I'd like to ask you, could you hazard a guess as to sort of what percentage of the building we are currently using and what percentage these changes would leave us using?
Well, we know before the pandemic we were using around about just under 40% of the building. Now, my caveat with that is it is essentially 3 buildings. You have the central core and then the east and west wings. There is a lot of space within the building. So, you know, pre-pandemic, using a reason, not occupying it at any one time. That's probably the comment I would make then, right? There are desks and chairs and facilities in a lot more of the building than that, but actually looking at the utilization of it, probably about 40% pre-pandemic. At the moment, the only bits of the building being used regularly are where social services are, because those staff, and just what I was going to say, Chair, is about that hybrid technology. Social services have been using that throughout the pandemic, so you know it works as a way of working with service users. Social services are in at a vast reduced number, but they're in when they need to be in. And other bits of the organisation, where document services and print rooms, so my staff have been in the building every day since the pandemic started. And there are other staff coming in as and when needed in order to make sure that we can still operate. So at the moment, a smaller utilisation. Now what we would look to do is essentially move to one of those 3 elements of the building. So the central core would make a lot of sense, because that's where the council chambers are and the committee rooms, and we're not going to remove those, though we need those to undertake our democratic functions. But we could occupy that easily and free up 2 wings. So that, in a nutshell, council, that's probably what we're looking at. But similarly, we could decamp to the east or west wing to do that.
Mm-hmm. And we then would become effectively landlords to a third party, possibly.
We could, but as the report says, we obviously, you know, we are trying to reduce the assets that we hold anyway. Again, as every other local authority has done. So some of that might be bringing in other services, although you'll be aware, we've done quite a lot of that already. But there could be some utilisation there for bits of our services, which then free up resources elsewhere. So you have the similar knock on then, you know, there are financial benefits of doing that, or other organisations to utilise it. So some of that could have a cost benefit to us. Some of it could just be from a partnership approach and a mutual benefit with other organisations. So yes, but I think really for the committee, just to say, I think if we go down this route and we collapse into a bit of the building, the plan is not to leave the rest of it empty. You know, we want, and there's an economic benefit to that for the city of Newport. You know, at the moment, pre-pandemic, we had probably at the maximum about 350 people in this building at any one time, which is not a massive amount. It would be great if there were several thousand people in this building every day. Most of them not our staff, but other organisations, because they're all going to walk to town, they're going to spend money in town, etc. So as long as they're not all driving in, I think there's some real benefits to that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Al-Nuami, you said you had a comment to make.
Yeah, it was about cycling and active travel. I'm sure colleagues would have noticed all the sort of work that is going on currently in Newport around the Civic Centre, in terms of the roadworks, you know, to try and make cycling safer. I think, you know, that's excellent. There's actually currently a public consultation on that as well. So perhaps we can add to that. But I think what's been done now under the active travel plan in Newport is really very welcome. I cycle myself, and I know how formidable the city centre is. I use Queensway, and I use the roads around the Civic Centre. It's not easy, it's hilly. However, during the lockdown, that was really a useful respite to really get to build your confidence and deal with motorists. On the whole, to be honest with you, I found motorists have been reasonably considerate. Yeah, you have the odd rude driver shouts at you and all that sort of thing. But on the whole, I found, you know, people do give you the berth you require. So I think, you know, it's really something we need to develop. I think it's great really for health, well-being, and also really to claim the roads from the motor car, you know, and onto a more carbon-friendly mode of transport. Thank you.
Thank you. Rhys, I guess you can continue on with the building.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself before I start talking. Okay, so like just without repeating all of that, just to say, so there's a bit in there around primary points of contact for customer services and social services. So we'll beef that bit up, right? So there's we make sure that we're really covering off in the report that actually there will still be that provision within the civic centre. It gives you some information there around the fact, obviously, we're trying to reduce our asset estate and around how the utilisation of the civic centre prior to that. And about technology then, and how technology can differ the way in which we work with the public, which I've talked about. There's just some examples in there. Some of the conversations are going on at the moment. So, you know, we've been having some conversations around utilising some space around a cultural hub, which you know says in there, which is about celebrating diversity in the city, etc. Now these have been set up. I think there's one in Swansea at the moment, one about to start in Wrexham. And actually, so that's just an example. That's one of the things that we're looking at the moment. We've had conversations with other partners around utilising some of the estate. We already have third parties in the building. So health are in the building, coroner's court is in the building. We've had police in the building previously. So those conversations are ongoing, but obviously we can't bring those to a conclusion until we've determined you know, what bit of the building we need and how we need to utilize it. So working through that, but there are definitely opportunities within that for, you know, bringing others into the building and utilizing it differently. I will say there are implications with doing that as well, because, you know, it is a secure building. You know, we have to work out which bits of it we're utilizing, how we lock down that and secure that, and then, you know, and what mechanisms and support others need within it. I suppose the other bit of the bit, which I haven't put into the report because it was party to a previous cabinet report, is obviously there's an IT implication which the cabinet have already made a decision on, and that is, you know, our servers are currently within the Civic Centre, and we will be moving them to a purpose-built data centre over the next year or so. So that's already happening. So obviously the considerations here around, you either reoccupy the building the same as we did pre-pandemic, or we maximise the utilisation of it. So we condense where we are. We might be bringing other council services in. We look at third-party opportunities for bringing into the premises, and we ensure that the building is actually utilised to its full extent. So then, obviously, if we go with option 2, then what we're looking at doing is, so as I previously said, zone in the Civic Centre. So they're actually working within your staffing groups, and there will be a booking system associated with that. We'll develop specific areas within the building. So this has come out of the public accessibility side of it. So ensuring that actually there are facilities within the building in order to work with members of the public, provide a service to them face to face, or as I previously said, using technology. Technological solution to support this sort of booking system. And then looking at the utilisation of the reception area and meeting rooms. So, you know, we have a booking system for meeting rooms at the moment, but how often do you use them? They're not really used on the weekends. How do we do that? So there's some revenue generation around some of this stuff as well, but then what do you need to do in order to maximise that? And again, it's about bringing the building into full usage. You know, it's a big asset, and we need to make sure that it's being utilised as much as we possibly can. So I know we've had some comments on that, but happy to take more comments and questions on the building side of it.
Thanks, Rhys. Councillor Berry, did you have a question? I've noticed you commented in the chat.
Sorry, Laura, were you calling me then?
Yeah, I've noticed you've commented in the chat. I just wondered if you had a question for Rhys on buildings.
Oh no, it's gone past that basically. If I can, I don't want to break away from what your discussion is, but I've been very lucky in that I've worked in this kind of environment with distributed buildings and facilities and an awful lot of experience, etc. And I can see that on a micro scale here in Newport, you're struggling with the same things that I did about 15, 20 years ago. All right. I didn't want to chip in because the discussion was going quite well, and I'm not too sure that the things I did 15 years ago are relevant or as important as what you're doing now, because it was on a different scale. OK. Do you want to come back?
I suppose it depends on what it'd be useful to have that information, Councillor. So I don't know whether you want to give it now or whether you could provide it outside of the meeting.
I think it would be better out. Basically, I lived in Puerto Rico and covered basically a chunk of USA and South America. OK, so it's a different scale altogether, but the models are the same. And I'd be more than happy to sit down with your team and just download what I've got. And what's relevant you can have for free, and what's not relevant, don't tell anybody else, because they'll only laugh at me then. That's not very good. So I'm more than happy to take part, but the technology that I'm dealing with at this point in time is not what I was used to 15 years ago.
Okay, I'll, if that's okay, Chair, I'll pick it up with Councillor Berry outside of the meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. That's no problem at all. Okay, so there doesn't seem to be any further questions on buildings. If you wanted to go on to the democratic function.
Sorry, Chair, I did.
Oh, sorry, there's a lot of chat going on in there, Councillor Hureen, but yeah, please, if you've got a question.
Yeah, I think Rhys has pretty well summed up all the problems that we've got with too much building. We could have a look at the nuclear option that our colleagues in Blaen and Gwent seem to be going to, where they seem to be talking about totally getting rid of their civic centre. I realise that might not be an option with Newport, with the civic centre being so iconic, but could we have a look at the feasibility of letting out both or either of the two wings, because they can hardly be described as high-class office accommodation without a great deal of money being spent on them. So is there any grants available for the modernisation of these buildings, or as Rhys has pointed out, we may be able to give them away to somebody for no benefit whatsoever, but we really shouldn't be expecting staff to work in these very out-of-date buildings. So could we have a discussion about the grants that may be available? I'd also urge caution. I work for an authority called North Haven, which built a lovely purpose-built council building for about 400 staff. And then when they became South Gloucestershire, they wanted to combine all their services to a place called Engine Common, and the building in Thornbury lies to this day totally unoccupied, a brand new purpose-built building. And I visited it just before the pandemic, and it's still just totally surplus to requirements. So this is something we need to guard against. But the idea of creating hubs and satellites is something I think the council's already going towards, the Ringland hub being the prototype. But there are plenty of buildings in the centre of Newport which small hubs could be created in, aligned with public transport, and it really is something that we should be considering. And I thank Rhys for all the work he's done in this, but I don't think he's actually expanded on these areas I've just mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Shall I respond?
Come back? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. So if regardless, I suppose some of the background to that, which might help to answer some of that question, is the Civic Centre is is an iconic Grade 2-star listed building, which occupies a significant location within Newport, and you're right, it's an iconic building. You can see it from quite a lot of the city. The view at the moment, and from the work that I've been doing, is that we need to maximise that. The Blaen and Gwent scenario is a bit different, because if you were acquainted with the building, it isn't quite the same as our civic centre. So I think they were different approach and a different opportunity for them with that. But again, go back to what I was saying, if the decision is taken that we, for instance, if the decision was taken that we moved solely into the central core of the building, then we would look for the opportunities for the other two wings. And you're absolutely right, Councillor, as in the current state, we certainly couldn't be seeking a revenue stream for sort of A-grade office accommodation. But there will still be opportunities for that. So, and whether they're investment opportunities or not, or we can find a third party to work with us on their investment, or we can find grant streams in order to support that. Those are all bits of work that would then be taken on by the Capital Strategic Asset Management Group. So that is, the local authority with Norse looking at how we maintain and develop the assets that we've got, and future assets, etc. So I think that's really useful. The bit I haven't gone into, so to pick up some of the other things, the other bit I haven't gone into within this report, because I tried to keep it solely because it is fairly amorphous as it is obviously we have got the work around the community hubs. Now, part of the equation for this is we are looking at the totality of how we deliver services, and the hubs were set up in the hubs were looked at originally in a particular way, and actually we've changed the way we looked at that now, because actually, if social services, for instance, are working out in communities, why do they need to be coming back and forth to the civic centre? Shouldn't they be out in communities? So actually we are it isn't in the report because it's not relevant to the bit about the building and the staff associated with that, but actually there's another bit of work now in place around those facilities and how we maximize those, and they are, I think it's referred to in the report as a touch point for staff, how we utilize those more effectively so that actually we're delivering services out in communities where they're needed, rather than bringing people and staff into the civic centre to do those things. So there's a bit that's not in this report, Councillor. I think you kind of touched on it, which is, you know, can you dispose of the civic centre? That is not a conversation we're having at the moment, but because of all the reasons that I've mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much for your reply, Rhys. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Rhys. If you wanted to go on to democratic services or democratic function, sorry.
Democratic function. So look, you know, and it goes back to the comment that Councillor Ferris made. So Part 3 of the Local Government Elections Act, we have a duty to promote access to local government. So that's not only ensuring we have electronic broadcasts of council meetings, but also make provision for remote access to those meetings. So in Wales, the thing that's happened in England does not apply in Wales for that reason. So essentially, as part of trying to ensure that we have a more diverse group of people involved in politics in Newport and accessing it, you know, and across Wales, that is within that legislation. So we've created hybrid meeting facilities, as we already talked about, in our meeting rooms. The council chambers, there's a specific bit of work going on with that to enhance that. Now, it's not in place at the moment, but we're working towards making sure we can do that, because we need to do that to be compliant with the Local Government Elections Act. So that's the kind of backdrop for democratic services. It is a bit different because legislation is pushing us in a particular way with that. So in the future, we will have to make provision for both electronic broadcasting and hybrid council and committee meetings for the local authority. So we're going through that process. Very similar to staff, you know, I've had a series of requests from members around well-being, so we are looking at how we enhance that programme as well. So at the moment, members can access those well-being initiatives and support that we've got in place for staff, and that all comes out to you in the staff bulletins. And again, as we enhance that for staff, as Rachel has talked about previously, we'll also look to do that for members at the same time. I put in a section in there which Gareth very helpfully provided on the independent remuneration panel about members and about the requirement for us to fund the equipment and provision they need in order to undertake their duties. And as that, if we're looking in the future at that being a hybrid model, then that needs to be able to facilitate that. So there's some considerations in this, which I'm sure you'll have comments on, which will be about referring this to Democratic Services Committee. So the first one is, should we retain a dispersed working model? But also I would say, and because of the Local Government Elections Act, we need to enhance the wellbeing provision for members, And then the second one then is around the remuneration package in order to support your abilities to access hybrid meetings and fulfill your functions as councillors. So I'm sure you will have comments on it, but the view would be, if we go down this, we'll have to do some of this anyway because of Local Government Elections Act, but that will be a referral to the Democratic Services Committee then to come up with some proposals, and then they would go to council.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I think it is, as I said, it's right that this goes to Democratic Services. I think the whole COVID and it's opened up an opportunity, hasn't it, especially for elected members to what's the word, entice other people that may not have been able to at one point being able to be a councillor. So the hybrid way of working, people with young children, people with mobility issues and different things. And I think it's the way that we work this way, or this new way of working is opening up that opportunity and making something available that perhaps wasn't there before. One question is and this is again, I'm crossing over two areas here, technology and the democratic function. Is Teams, is this a government preferred system? I'm just thinking, we have enough trouble as it is without, even before we're hybrid, getting into that hybrid way of working. Are we still reliant then on, do we have to use Teams, or will we be looking at other potential video conferencing tools? Or because I said, over the last few months, okay, we're having some significant issues at the moment, which is a Microsoft issue, not our issue. I allude to it's a software issue. But we've yourself, over the last 12 months, we've had some significant issues with the facility, with this video facility, things not working. Is this a Welsh Government preferred tool to use, or is this something that we've used as a council?
It's certainly not a Welsh Government preferred tool, although Microsoft do work with Welsh Government on it. As I said, like the current situation we've got, which I've been asking for an update on, is purely to do with a Microsoft upgrade, which gets pushed out. We've got no choice about that, and it's had an impact on not just us, but a range of organisations. From my point, I'd suggest most of the issues we've had around this have been down to individual issues. So an individual laptop, an individual home network connection, etc. We haven't had too many significant issues with it as a system. It is very resilient. It's backed up by probably the biggest software company in the world. So it's used by millions of people across the globe. So it's a pretty resilient system. There are points of weakness within that, all right, because it does rely, and these are some of the things we'll need to pick up in the future. So, more broadly on the bit about the democratic function is around ensuring that actually you've all got the facilities in order to access stuff remotely. So there are some things around that. You're right, there are alternatives. But if I just put this in context for you, so this is fundamentally, this is a me decision. All right, so you can blame me for it. We obviously use Microsoft because of the facilities around Outlook. We use it for Office, which is probably the really big one. A couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago now, Microsoft changed their pricing structure for public sector bodies and their enterprise agreements. And the most cost-effective way for us then was going to Microsoft Office 365. That ended up being cheaper than sticking what we previously had. So that's the cloud-based service then. So it is significantly different to the previous Microsoft offering. And then that brings you Teams. Teams is part of that package. We don't pay additional for it. That whole enterprise license for next year is going to cost us £500,000 for the organisation. To have an alternate video conferencing facility, an enterprise agreement with that, would add well in excess of £100,000 to that bill. So we've got no choice about, we already pay for Teams, it's part of the package. You can't have an agreement with Microsoft that doesn't include it. So having an alternative would mean a significant increase in budget associated with that. So that ultimately that's the decision. And Teams is no less resilient than the other. It's different. It's got different facilities and it operates in a different way, but it's no less resilient than the other offerings. But in order to have something additional to it, it is a significant increase in cost.
Thank you. I guess it's just the traffic, the amount of traffic that's going through Teams and the Microsoft thing is potentially. But I guess is it very, at the moment it's very busy because everybody is still probably massively doing this. Over the years it'll drop off where we go back into this hybrid thing, and it might be a bit less clunky, I suppose. Well,
if I just, because I know, Che, you know a lot about this, but if I just go through the kind of where the pinch points are. So at the moment, I'll do the non-organizational stuff and the organizational stuff. So the non-organizational stuff is, yes, there's a lot of traffic going through, but they've upgraded and enhanced. So a lot of the time the upgrades are because they bring in new servers online from Microsoft in order to keep up with the demand. So that is the case. There's a significant increase in loading on the network infrastructure across the world. And the UK is no different to that. So outside of Newport City Council and Microsoft, lots more people are using the internet for lots more things. And bear in mind, this is something that goes out over the internet. So, there's a loading from each of your home scenarios is different as well. So depending on your providers and where you live and the package you will have different capabilities at home as well. So those are all the external things. And as we know, things happen. There'll be some roadwork somewhere and suddenly you want to have Wi-Fi access. All right, so we know things like that. So those are the external things. From an internal point of view, at the moment, our mobility solution is something called NetMotion. So, what that does is drive. That is a secure mobility solution. So what it does is drive the traffic from you at home through a very narrow pipeline, secure pipeline, out to our servers or to our cloud-based systems. That is a limiting factor, and we'll be moving off that this year to always-on VPN, which is in the report, which is again part of the Microsoft package, and that's dual channel. It will only send stuff that needs to be secured down that then. So that will improve things. We'll be improving our internal servers. So I've already mentioned that. And we are working with BT, and believe it or not, we've had a call in with BT to do this since March 2020 to enhance our capacity. So basically to broaden our pipeline that comes into our servers and out of our servers. So all those things will make it better. But there are limitations outside of our control around the rest of it.
No, that's good. And as you said, it is a nightmare. It depends on what broadband you've got at home. As you said, as soon as you click onto any sort of VPN, it literally drains the Wi-Fi from all across the house. And in my house, I've got 16 devices connected at any one point, which is just crazy. Probably I'm a little bit more, but I think the average is probably about 5 or 6 at least, and you connect everything. So there is a lot to do with bandwidth, and I do wonder whether it's something for elected members now need to go through some technology training, because some of them are more technologically adept than others, and I think that's something that maybe we should look at, is getting our elected members through the laptop, the broadband. Councillor Arnamami, for example, today is having significant issues, but through no fault of his own, and just being able to bring that forward, because I know some of the members do struggle significantly each time. But then that hybrid model allows them to come into the office, whereas some of us might maybe sat around, I guess. So, but I don't know if we've got any further questions on the democratic function. But I guess you've also gone into the technology side. If you just wanted to go on to that one, and then maybe we can couple the questions together if there are any.
Yeah, so just on the technologies, I think I've covered quite a lot of this, but just to say that for those of you who've been around for some time, when I took over IT in 2016, it was significantly less, had a lower funding than most other local authorities in Wales, and we were also going through the uncertainty about whether we were going to join the Shared Resource Service. So that happened in 2017. We've now got a lot of stability, and we've invested as well. So we've got an exceptionally good team within the organisation, led by Mark Blezard, that manages the client side arrangements with Shared Resource Service, but also deals with sort of digital stuff, and they do a lot of work with the Democratic Services team around support for members as well, and how we do things. And we can always do more. There's been a significant increase in resourcing. So again, going back to what we talked about previously, when lockdown happened, the first lockdown happened on March 23rd last year, we were in a really good position because we already had Office 365, we already had Teams facilities. 85% of our staff had a laptop. Members had laptops and iPads. So we had a mobility solution. We were already geared up to be able to do things, and we've made enhancements to that over that period of time. But the new world, we have to prepare for the new world. So I talked about the digital strategy, and that will cover both the internal and external aspects of it. We are moving our service suite, so they'll be more resilient, robust, and actually quicker at doing things. We are increasing our bandwidth, so actually we'll make things faster for you as well. We are putting in place a different remote access solution, which is basically dual banded. So, things that need a secure connection will have a secure connection. Things like Teams and email don't require that secure connection from us because they're on a secure cloud system anyway with Microsoft. So we're just doubling up on things we don't need to with that. So that will make things better. So I think the technological bit of this is making sure that it enables you to do your jobs in the way we need to do them in the future. It enables our staff to do it. It augments and enhances the work we're doing face to face. It enables us to put our resource where it's required rather than where we can have alternate or technology to manage those things. Again, not to go in a lot of detail with that, the lockdown triggered an enhanced risk around cybersecurity. The more people you've got working remotely, the more points of weakness you've got, because you can have any number of fail-safes within your systems in order to prevent a cyber attack. Unfortunately, and I don't mean this to sound negative about people, but people are always your weak link within that. So it affords more opportunities for there to be cyber attack, and we've put in place additional mechanisms to safeguard ourselves against some of those things as well. But just to say, it's on our corporate risk register. We talk about it in audit and governance committee quite regularly. It's not just us. That's a security threat across public sector bodies across the UK. So you will be seeing more investment in that. And the flip side with that is occasionally we have to lock things down more than you might want us to. But that's really looking at it from being security conscious and ensuring we're not opening ourselves up to any further threats. So that's the text. I don't know if there's any questions around that, Chair.
Again, me, if I might. What's the because this was something I thought of and I need to think about. So obviously we've got some departments where it's very highly sensitive, very highly confidential, social services, for example, and other things. Working from home, printing out records, putting them on the kitchen table, and walking off, because it's as you do. I print out, and so But then those emails going back and forth. What's our encryption on those highly sensitive things? Are we just looking at encryption, Microsoft encryption, or do we have a double encryption with a key for people who work in those sorts of teams that require that high sensitivity?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So obviously there's information data security trainers in place for staff. We do lots of training with social services for those very reasons. They are very clear rules, I wouldn't say guidance, rules around it. And so we would not expect somebody to be sat at home printing off confidential records. Actually, we keep printing to a minimum for social services staff. It's kept as electronic copies on WCCIS, which is a national system which we're part of, which is a secure system. Those records that we do have are in modern records, and that's bolted down, so only certain people have access to that facility. So nobody can go in there really unless they're given authorization to do that. As far as email traffic with that, we currently have egress, which is a secured encryption. So basically, if you need to send a sensitive email and need it to be encrypted, that will do it, and only the recipient. The intended recipient will be able to open that. Outside of that, our email system is in a secure environment anyway, because it's in an environment off-site, cloud-based, secured by Microsoft. So pretty hard, unless we are subject to a cyber attack, pretty hard to actually access anyway. But for those additional sensitive things, we use egress currently, but we are looking at alternate systems for that as well at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Al-Nawami, you've got your hand up for a question.
Yeah, on the technological issues, I mean, if we do go for this hybrid mode of working, you mentioned cyber attacks and that sort of thing. We would want one, wouldn't we, that in case of something like that, or if, for a sort of what we might describe as computers gone down or that sort of thing, system gone down, that we actually, that the council can cope, that people can cope with that situation, that we would have a reasonably strong backup to that situation?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. So we have, as a local authority, 5 years ago had a cyber attack which we recovered from really, really quickly, because the measures we got in place were put into action. We've got enhanced facilities now over and above that, and we had work very closely with SRS and other partners around doing that. Interestingly, Councillor Al-Nawami, just to say, so following this meeting, my next meeting today is IT business continuity arrangements. So we have, so essentially, if a system goes down, we categorize our systems as platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. Platinum systems, if a platinum system goes down, everything is thrown at that to get that system back up and running. And we have business continuity arrangements around that. So either a backup, a fail-safe, or a duplicate system that can be utilised in order to pick that up. And then individual service areas have business continuity arrangements, and that includes their IT facilities. So if you're a service area that relies on an IT system, if that system goes down, what are your arrangements for still operating? So there's a technological bit to this, but there's also a business continuity bit to it as well. Because the reality is, pre-COVID, we are massively reliant on IT provision, and we're even more so now.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Rhys? I guess we've come to the end of your report there, Rhys, unless did you want to go into the conclusion and sum up?
Well, I think the conclusions are pretty much what I've talked about. I suppose just to say to the committee, so obviously what's going to go forward in the cabinet report is a recommendation that we move forward with this, that we consult with staff on those range of things, and that we move forward with those other bits of work that we are doing. If cabinet agree to that, then there will be a period of consultation with staff around it, and then a subsequent report back to cabinet in the autumn to confirm that. Okay. And I think that's probably all I'd want to say in conclusion. Really.
Okay. Thank you for your time today. It's interesting. It's always an interesting report, this, and as I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens where we are this time next year with things, I guess. But thank you for your time, Rhys. We'll sum up and then I guess we'll come back to you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Committee. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. So the next, obviously, if you want to go through, I mean, from my perspective, I'm happy to, obviously, with Rhys's comments that we push the report to cabinet with what's included. I think Rhys has mentioned that he's will add the comments that we've made in on different areas. Are there any comments from anybody on this?
Chair, if I might come in on this, I think I would have liked to have seen a more broad brush approach to the future of our iconic civic centre and the potential for leasing it out. But I don't think we're actually there at the moment that we can move forward with this report. So I think we probably have no alternative other than to accept the recommendations and go forward with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Houlihan. Any other comment?
So our comments would go as we discussed, or as minuted. I'd like us, to highlight the engagement with the public. I think that's very important for us as a public services organisation.
I agree. I think that, and I think Rhys picked that up, didn't he? He said he would make that more full-bodied in the actual report. But I agree, Councillor, we need to make sure that we've still got that public, we're still there for people face to face, or as you said, that hybrid way of working, that we don't just become one of these organisations of press one to get so and so and speak to this. It's just it's awful. We need to be there for the people of Newport, as you say, in person or over video phone. I quite like that approach as well.
Yeah, can I suggest? I think Neil did do that last time. He sent us the minutes, and I think there is a requirement on us, isn't it, to have the minutes within a week of the meeting today, so that we can look at the minutes before they can actually be finalised. Is that something we can ask we do, please?
Yeah, Neil, is that okay?
That's fine, Chair, thanks.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so if we've got the draft minutes, then obviously we can make comments on what's in there that goes forward.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, so in conclusion then, so next we obviously got our forward work programme and actions arising. So we've got a bit of a jam-packed agenda for our next one. Let me just pick up the email that I've got it in there. So our next meeting is Friday the 9th of July, again 10 AM, and we're looking at that on this is a full meeting, annual corporate safeguarding, annual risk report, as well as the annual digital report. So we're a busy meeting, and we've been asked, which I've agreed to because I feel it's quite important. We've got another meeting then at the end of July, Friday the 30th of July, where Joe Gossage and Jenny Judd have asked us to look at the parks PSPO. So I think it's important that they're keen to get this go out to public consultation and to get this started sooner rather than later. So on your behalf, I've agreed to have a second meeting in July, which is obviously Friday the 30th of July. So hopefully that's not too much of an issue for you all, but I think it's an important topic that we need to help these guys with, if that's okay.
Chair, sorry, what did you say the meeting was on the 30th of July? What was the subject?
Parks PSPO.
Right, thank you.
So I think it's something that I said it's an important topic that they want to get out to public consultation as soon as possible, really. And as you know, from the back of our agenda this time, we've actually got our action sheet, and that's been requested for the last few weeks. So thank you for that. We've got our what we've been doing, what's been going on, and our outcomes. But otherwise, guys, I think thank you for your time. It's been a good meeting. And apologies for the technological issues that we've been experiencing, or some of you have been experiencing. So hopefully, by the next meeting, we'll be up and running properly. But have a good day, everyone, and thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Yes.